Hello, this is the development of social cognition in adolescents, an information presentation for youth work. So social cognition. This refers to the ability to make sense of the world through processing signals of other humans, as described by Frith in 2008. Individual differences in social cognition might explain why some adolescents have social problems, shown by Lenhart and Rabiner in 1995. Social cognition refers to the perception and interpretation of social information. Social skills, however, is a broad umbrella term which refers to the repertoire of behaviours used to navigate social demands and achieve social goals across varying contexts, as shown by Muser and Belak in 1998. A diverse set of skills has been conceptualized to comprise social skills. Research suggests that social cognition develops through both childhood and adolescence and develops in four processes. These are cognitive architecture, automaticity and control, motivated reasoning, and accessibility of frames and expectations, shown by Lieberman in 2005. The theory of mind has been described as recognizing others' beliefs, desires, and emotions, and how these differ to our own, as stated by Harris et al. In 1989. And Leslie et al. In 2004 suggested that this develops around 4 years old. Dumenthal, Appley and Blakemore in 2010 suggest that theory of mind is still improving in late adolescence after working memory and response inhibition abilities have reached adult levels. Response times were slower in the experimental than the control conditions and the director rather than the non-director conditions. Response times only improved with age in the no-director condition, and this is likely to reflect maturational processes. Theory of mind has been divided into two components: cognitive theory of mind and affective theory of mind. Cognitive theory of mind is the general definition previously given, whereas affective theory of mind integrates theory of mind with empathy and other emotions, and is focused on higher order processing of emotion-based information. When performing the task from the director's perspective in Dumenthal, Appley and Blakemore's 2010 study, i.e. social processing rather than symbolic, activations in the superior dorsal medial prefrontal cortex were found in all age groups. Adolescents showed greater activation of dorsal medial prefrontal cortex than adults, and adolescents recruited the DMPC even when social processing wasn't needed, for example in control tasks. Some evidence is provided in the form of neuroscientific studies, with lesion studies and neuroimaging findings offering support for cognitive theory of mind and affective theory of mind being housed in different areas of the brain. The medial prefrontal cortex is a key area implicated in theory of mind development throughout adolescence. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex is related to affective theory of mind, and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is related to cognitive theory of mind. Previous research suggests that the teen brain develops from back to the front, so cognitive theory of mind would naturally develop first, and this was suggested by Sebastian et al. In 2012. So the Dumenthal, Appley and Blakemore 2010 study has both strengths and weaknesses. One strength of this study is that it has a large sample, which includes diverse ages. This is a strength because it makes the sample more representative of the general population, making it easier to apply their findings to real-life situations. Another positive is that this study's findings are supported by other research, such as Kaiser et al. In 2000 and 2003, and Romain and Reynolds in 2005. This shows that their findings are probably correct, as their studies have the same outcome. However, the researchers do not discuss why their participants behaved the way they did. The researchers talk about what they observed and how participants behaved, but give no discussion as to why this might have happened. However, they do make a recommendation that future research should investigate this, and suggest that future research should consider if there are neurological causes for this observed behaviour. The Cyberball task is a 3-player computerized game of Pass. Participants are told they're playing with real peers, but in reality it's a computer game which is programmed to include or exclude them, as shown in the top right-hand corner. As you can see from the graph of findings, being excluded had a significant negative effect on mood. And brain scans have also found that social exclusion activation patterns are similar to that of physical pain. Abrams et al. In 2011 measured responses to ostracism while playing Cyberball across 4 different domains: esteem, belonging, meaning, and control. 3 groups of participants, 8 to 9 years old, 13 to 14 years old, and adults were involved in the study. Ostracism threatened self-esteem more amongst 8 to 9 years old, whereas it threatened belonging more against 13 to 14 years old, therefore demonstrating that social cognition and the effects of social exclusion changes throughout development. Moral reasoning is the cognitive ability to analyze and evaluate social situations in light of moral criteria. This is done to establish judgments about right and wrong, as well as regulate behavior. Adolescents show increased flexibility and nuance in their interpretation of fairness, justice, welfare, and rights. Research indicates that moral reasoning, the rational analysis of moral dilemmas, improves with age, though other factors also predict moral reasoning, such as intellectual functioning, verbal fluency, and SES. Adolescents are more able to reason about moral issues than children. This is consistent with research showing that morality develops in parallel with theory of mind and executive function, and may share a brain network, as shown by Scheisen et al. In 2017. Biologically in the brain, the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex has been shown to be activated when deducing the mental states of others and reflecting on the traits of others and the self. The temporoparietal junction has been shown to activate when inferring mental states, not just information that is known about another. The posterior superior temporal sulcus has been activated when observing faces and biological motion, and the anterior temporal cortex is activated when applying social knowledge. Social cognition is argued to be integral to the survival and reproductive fitness of some primate species, in which their brains contain regions specialized for social cognition. Extensive neuropsychological evidence shows that these areas are collectively involved in mentalizing, mental state attribution tasks, but individual contribution of areas is still up for debate. There are lots of changes in the structure and function of the brain throughout adolescence. Grey matter volume and cortical thickness decreases across adolescence in the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, temporoparietal junction, and posterior superior temporal sulcus. The anterior temporal cortex is a little slower. Grey matter starts to decrease in adolescence, and cortical thickness decreases in the mid-20s. This is associated with the synaptic pruning and increases in white matter integrity or myelination in these areas. Changes may be triggered by puberty or be a consequence of hormones. In terms of functional changes, fMRI scanning shows that the areas of the brain recruited for social cognition are different for children, adolescents, and adults. So, what are the limitations of this approach? Biological approaches are beneficial, as you can conduct brain scans and other medical tests to visually see effects. However, it's also restrictive, as this approach doesn't take into account how environment or social cultural influences might impact behavior. Because of this limited explanation, it also doesn't take into account individual differences and how this might have an impact on behavior. In addition to this, a lot of evidence is fMRI based. fMRI is non-invasive, which is a positive, however only measures blood flow, so can't home in on the activity of individual neurons. Therefore, it's hard to tell exactly what brain activity is being represented on an fMRI scan. It also only focuses on the brain sites which receive increased blood flow, therefore fails to account for the importance of brain sites which connect and communicate with each other. The research suggests that adolescence is a sensitive period for a range of factors, such as memory, the effects of stress on mental health, and how susceptible an individual is to social cues. Research has attributed this sensitivity to the higher levels of brain plasticity in adolescence, as shown in the diagram by Furman et al. In 2015. Socially isolated rats show increased synaptic plasticity in brain areas associated with reward-based learning and addictive behavior, and this was shown by Whittaker et al. In 2013. More evidence is needed showing that teens are firstly more susceptible to social cues than children and adults, and secondly more sensitive to social and environmental cues relative to other cues. And this has been suggested by Blakemore and Mills in 2014 and Steinberg in 2014. The previously mentioned findings can be applied to youth work in many ways. but mainly need to be applied to develop approaches that take into account how adolescents think, feel, and behave throughout their development. Approaches within youth work need to consider at what point in their social cognition development your client is, and practices used with clients need to be tailored to individuals and their social cognition, considering their theory of mind and moral reasoning skills. For example, how a client morally reasons needs to be taken into account when addressing their behaviors with substance abuse or the way they display aggression. Practitioners also need to consider that adolescence is a sensitive period, and the experiences that clients have through this phase of development can influence their experiences, mental health, and beliefs in adulthood. Research has made recommendations for improvement and tested these practical suggestions. For example, by Lerner and Castellino in 2002 and Ollendijk in 2001, who evaluated how developmental theory has been applied to the treatment of disorders in childhood. However, there's still a gap between research findings and recommendations and how often these are put into place, and this has been shown by Hubner et al. In 2003. So in summary, social cognition is different to social ability. And research suggests that social cognition develops through both childhood and adolescence in 4 separate processes. Evidence has been provided in the form of neuroscientific studies, with lesion studies and neuroimaging findings offering support for the separation of cognitive and affective theory of mind, and that these are both housed in different areas of the brain. Abrams et al. In 2011 demonstrated that social cognition and the effects of social exclusion has on adolescents changes throughout their developing. Grey matter volume and cortical thickness decrease across adolescence in the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex, temporoparietal junction, and posterior superior temporal sulcus. Research suggests that adolescence is a sensitive period for a range of different factors. The previously mentioned theory and research findings need to be applied to approaches used with clients in youth work. And here is some more reading and references for the presentation. Thank you very much.